Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. What instant karma for your boss stories do you have? At my last job, I had a new senior manager hired to run my division and our sister division. I finally broke down after working with him for 6 months. He would call me at 5:01 a.m. to see if I was still there, email me at 1 a.m., I had a company BlackBerry, to ask for the changes to the presentations he gave in the morning about my division, and ask my receptionist to write down what was going on in my office. 3 of us shared an office, he was down the hall. It was the worst boss I've ever had, but I had to work for him because there weren't many jobs available. When I got back from a week off, that was the last blow. He approached me and asked why I was quitting. I hadn't submitted notice nor notified anyone I was. He was the first person I told if I did, so I told him I wasn't. He walked away after calling me a liar. That afternoon, I sent him an email telling him I was quitting with 3 weeks' notice. When it was time for me to leave, I told the HR team everything about what he did. After 4 weeks, he was fired along with my secretary. I worked as a summer job at a well-known amusement park. There were ducks and mice everywhere. I had to man carts around the park and sell ice cream, cokes, and popcorn. It was the job of one of our bosses every morning to put all of the workers in the right places around the carts. Some of the carts didn't have very high tops, so I couldn't stand up in them. I'm quite tall, 6'6", or 198 centimeters. These were also the carts that were the busiest and that workers hated the most. When I asked nicely, most managers would put me in carts without roofs. This jerk, on the other hand, thought I was trying to avoid the bad carts, so she always put my name next to one of them on the list. That was a pain in the behind every time I had to ask to be moved and call another boss. She hated me for it. Then my last day came. The boss I hated was on duty and put me in a place that looked more like a small fast food place. There was a small house where food would be sold and people could sit down to eat. And because they paid an outrageous amount of money to get in and for their food, guests never cleaned up their trays and left everything on the table. This meant that there was always someone there to help with sales and mostly to clean up tables. Of course, that was me that day. The park and space both closed at 11 p.m., so cashiers would usually finish their shifts at 11 p.m., and the helper would leave at midnight, giving them an hour to clean up and leave. My shift finished at 11 p.m. as well. When I asked this jerk if she wanted me to stop at 10, she yelled that the place shuts down at 11 p.m. and there was no way I could get out of it. You guessed it, at 10:50, my coworker stopped the business, took his money, and left. I went with him, of course, and left behind a mess of trash cans and dirty tables. We both went back to our base. The bad girl gets mad when she sees me and tells me I need to come back and clean the place because I left an hour early. I might have a lot of trouble and even get fired right away, she says. I had been waiting for that moment all day long. I proceeded to show her the employee's timetable where next to my name, you could read 3 to 11 p.m. last day. I logged off while she was yelling at me. Some of her coworkers told me that she needed to ask them for help. Nobody wanted to do extra time late at night, so she had to do it herself at almost 1 in the morning. I pretty much caused a chain reaction of people to quit, which led to the boss being fired. My first boss at CVS was great. I worked 15 hours a week and went to college at the same time. There was no real need for the extra money because they had grants. The next guy came in after that manager moved to a bigger shop. After that, one person quit. They worked some hours too. My hours doubled all of a sudden. Every week, I worked about 30 hours. After about 2 months of I'll fix it, yeah, it'll get better next week, and my favorite, can you work with me? I found out that my boss didn't care. It wasn't just me. The other workers and I both knew that none of us were happy. A lot of us wanted to leave for the same reasons. The boss was making too many plans for the shop and wouldn't hire anyone else, but we were waiting for the right time. I found out that my friends and I were having a big Halloween party in 2 weeks, so there's no better time than now. Put in my 2 weeks. 0 F's given. I was actually really sick on my last day, which was kind of a good thing. I called and said I didn't want to go in because I felt bad. After about a month, I ran into someone who worked at the shop. Apparently, the day after I quit, they lost a shift supervisor, one of the other clerks, a pharmacy tech, the lead photo supervisor, and a pharmacist. If you don't know, in a place like CVS, pharmacists are worth their weight in gold and hard as F to hire. It sounds like his bosses didn't like that, so the manager was fired. I like to believe that I was the rock that set off the landslide. It didn't happen to me. My dad had it happen. My family moved to the United States from Mexico. In Mexico, my dad was the best engineer that company had. It took him 2 hours to do the work that other people would take 4. Everyone knew that he was good. When I was 5 years old, they sent him to America to work in a bigger plant with more complicated machines. The evil a-hole of a company overworked my dad, only paid him half of his hours, and his boss even fired him after finding out they were going to promote him over him. His work card was the only reason he stayed with them. The company pretty much owned my family. They would say they would send us back, so he would stay there by himself. When another part of the company found out, they hired him again in Texas, where it was the same crap all over again. This time, though, my dad started looking for a new job in secret. We were residents at that point because we had green cards, so they could no longer control us. He quit as soon as he found a job that paid 100 times more, which was the best time for him to do it. The company would have to pay between $7,500,000 and $1 million to fix the machine that makes the complicated oil rig cables. Just for fun, my dad asked his friend who still worked there for some plans. He figured out what was wrong and then waited to see what the business would do. In the end, they had to replace a costly part just so it would break down again. The whole time, my dad would be laughing his A off because that was his machine and he knew it was a simple but essential piece that would cost like $100 to replace. The company didn't figure that out until spending over $200,000 on the machine. What is your nightmare story with the homeowners association? The wife and I moved out of our neighborhood and have sworn never to move into another neighborhood again purely because of HOAs. Some of the letters we have wrecked as well as neighbors include, in the summer, ants emerged after 3 days of rain, dug up their tiny ant houses, and created some hills. Nothing too outlandish here and there. Letter ordering us to remove the ant hills or pay a fee. While everyone's lawns were suffering from the drought and the ban on watering them, a neighbor's yard had a clover patch sprouting in it. Sent a letter telling people to only plant fescue and to take care of the clovers. 19 bushes must be planted in front of the house per HOA regulations. Neighbor only had 17 when they landscaped. She had to pay fines since she didn't have the required quantity of shrubs. And the coup de grace? We wanted a fence around our yard, and the HOA only allowed specific types, aluminum fake wrought iron fence, or all whiteboard type. Additionally, to obtain prior approval for the layout and fencing. Okay, we carry out that. Put up a fence around the yard. Alleys don't have a right-of-way since homes have alley-fed drives and the property line runs across the middle of the alley. The fence could legally be placed 2 inches off the edge of the pavement because we are thinking people, but we choose not to do that. Naturally, this is sized in our layout plan that was approved by the HOA and ARC. We receive a letter telling us that we must move the fence back to 4 inches off the EOP after the fence had been up for around 3 to 4 months. WTF! We phone and ask why and are informed that drivers in the alley require enough space to turn around in the alley and to be able to back up into the alley. Fortunately for me, I work as a civil engineer for developers, designing their sites and informing them that a 12-inch wide alley is sufficient for mobility, the DOT needs 12-inch lanes, and that backing maneuvers within a 12-inch wide lane are possible and do not require a 14-inch wide lane. The layout was also given approval by the ARC and HOA. HOA says move it or else. Me. Or else I'll contact our lawyer, which was not BS. We do have a lawyer/firm we use for multiple lawyer stuff. Never heard from them again. I believe that a lot of the HOA nonsense that occurs is caused by the power-hungry/intoxicated individuals joining the board and having whatever they or their buddies think should happen or be decided upon happen. Furthermore, some of the letters that we or our neighbors receive were so absurd that we believe the HOA management company was sending out fines regardless of justification in order to demonstrate to the HOA board that, hey, look how many infractions we're fining. Look at the great job we're doing for your community. My brother and I purchased a portable basketball hoop when we were in middle school, which we used in the driveway and stored in the garage when not in use. Given that there were public hoops by the pool, we received a penalty for having basketball goals on our property. Because the basketball court was so close to the HOA president's home and because she detested the sound of basketball games, she kept the courts locked and only let her kids use them when they wanted to. Due to a gap in the community handbook's description of fence type and height, my mother and a few other parents filed a petition to have the fence surrounding the courts removed. In the end, the gate was taken down, allowing everyone, not just her kids, to use the courts. Not my story, but a good one. My friend used to work for a privately held supplier of HVAC equipment. The proprietor, let's call him Mr. J, established the business from the ground up and is well known for being very practical and thrifty. He still drives his 1960s-era first automobile, which is on the rear lot of one of their locations. Mrs. J wanted to live in a home that reflected their financial success. Mr. J didn't really care, but since his wife had supported him throughout his career, he decided to buy her a home in the Micromanaging community for upper-middle-class people. The trees are all little because the homes are all new. He digs up a tree in the front yard that won't make it through the winter and tops off the hole. A short while later, the HOA sends him a letter informing him that he must replace the tree in accordance with the rules. He screams, "Pee off." They exchange words, and then one day he returns home to see a bill in his mailbox and a new tree planted in the front yard. He pulls all the trees on his land out of the ground and throws them onto the street after more back and forth between them. Once it gets to court, Mr. J asks his attorney to keep pursuing the case until the HOA runs out of money. The attorney does this, the HOA is in such financial straits that they are unable to even afford to send out their newsletter, and Mr. J replaces every tree on his property, including the one that started it all. Overplayed and destroyed, a prime example of why HOAs shouldn't trespass on other people's property. To monitor reckless driving in our community, the HOA engages a private security agency, note, not the police. It should also be emphasized that this came about because a FedEx truck went over a speed bump in the rain traveling downhill and smashed into someone's house, so not even a resident. Many people receive absurd fines from the HOA for exceeding the speed limit and running stop signs, such as going 5 miles per hour over the limit and rolling stops with no one in sight. This is also a gated community. According to the citations, you must pay the HOA $250 or present your case in person at an HOA meeting if you don't, or they will disable your gate clicker and force you to use the guest line. It's obvious that a large number of attendees attend the meeting to complain. Only the panel and the defendant are present in the room as the board, which is presided over by an ex-cop, hears each case individually. He always responded with, "That's no excuse. We'll waive the fines this time, but the next time it's $500. The corporation that developed the houses has 2 votes in the elections for each vacant property, according to some investigation by another neighbor who had actually run to be on the HOA due to earlier crap. They take advantage of this by casting a majority of their votes for the candidate they want on the board. Thankfully, that whole deal is behind us now after a resident lawyer wrote some letter. Not a nightmare with HOA, a nightmare for HOA. Rare example of someone successfully competing against them in their own game. Someone I know wanted a fence in his backyard, and he wanted it to be rather big, but this went against the guidelines of the Homeowners Association. Regardless, he put one in, and not long after, he received a note telling him to take it out. You have the right to defend yourself in court, but a homeowners association must hire counsel in order to file a lawsuit in the region where he lived. In addition, the homeowners association was responsible for paying the attorney out of the cash collected by the HOA. These funds, however, were somewhat restricted because the community was so small and the fees were so low. Therefore, he practically stated that he would battle them in court over it, despite the fact that he was fully aware that he would be unsuccessful in doing so in the event that the case went to trial. My friend waited until the very last possible second before saying, "Okay, I'll just remove the fence so we don't have to take this to trial." The HOA had hired legal counsel and paid the retainer and fees associated with the litigation. He took down the barrier initially, but then reinstalled it after a few weeks had passed. This time, the HOA did not have the financial resources necessary to take him to court or take any other action. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.